In May 2009, Karen and I took our Bike Fridays to Europe to bicycle in Switzerland, Germany, and France, and cruise along the fiords of Norway. It seems all such travel encounters a bump or two along the way, and the major bump for this trip came early. Halfway across the Atlantic, the plane had to turn back to get a sick passenger to the closest hospital, at Halifax. By then the flight crew had too many hours in the air to continue to Europe. However, authorities wouldn't allow the plane to remain in Nova Scotia, so we had to fly to JFK in New York to let the crew rest, giving us an unplanned stay at a Holiday Inn with smoggy views over New York City, courtesy of Swiss Air. Eventually, we got to the B&B in Zurich that Karen had reserved. By experience, we found the best way to overcome jet lag is lots of activity and bright sunshine, so we headed out to see some of the sites of interest in Zurich. Zurich's long history precedes Roman times. My main focus was on sites significant to the Reformation of the early 16th century. A few are seen here, but that will need to be a whole separate presentation. While wandering around Zurich, we realized that it was our 40th wedding anniversary, and we enjoyed a dinner with Swiss fondue at a restaurant on the edge of one of the main squares. From our B&B balcony, we could observe some of the local night activity before going to bed. From Zurich, we took a train to the Bodensee and caught a ferry to Friedrichshafen in Germany, where we entered the EU and unpacked our Bike Fridays behind the customs building. We then had a nice 10K ride along the Bodensee to get to the apartment we had rented in Immenstadt. Karen was a little disappointed, expecting to be right on the lake. However, the apartment was quite nice with good views and a nice garage for parking the bikes and trailers. Then it was time to get out and ride. A bike route goes all around the Bodensee, but the most scenic part is on the north side of the lake in Germany. First we rode from Immenstadt to Überlingen near the west end of the lake, enjoying the vineyards, countryside, towns, and cafes along the way. The next day we rode to Lindau at the east end of the lake. From Lindau we took a ferry back to Immenstadt so we could enjoy the scenery from the lake. Another ferry took us across the Bodensee to Constance, which has a rich history going back to the Stone Age. 100 years before Martin Luther, a priest in Prague named Jan Hus advanced similar ideas and was excommunicated. He was given a guarantee of safe passage to explain himself at the Council of Constance. After he got there, it was decided that the promise of safe passage was not legally binding for a heretic. In 1415, Jan Hus was condemned in this church, taken to a field outside the city wall, and burned at the stake at this spot. We left Constance to ride along the Rhine River after it leaves the Bodensee. Heading downstream to Schaffhausen, we anticipated a fairly easy ride. However, the bike route was unexpectedly hilly, making a very tiring ride for Karen's first full day of pulling the trailer. On the way, we passed through the medieval town of Stein am Rhein, noted for its elaborately frescoed facades. While Schaffhausen is on the Rhine River, we discovered it is located in a deep valley, and the B&B where we had reservations was at the top of a steep hill several miles away from the center. Not wanting to ride down to the center for dinner and back up to the B&B, we accepted our host's gracious offer to fix a plate of gourmet cheese, bread, and fruit in the garden. From Schaffhausen, we took a side trip through the hilly Swiss countryside to visit a museum in the small town of Schleitheim, then back to the Rhine to see the Rhine Falls, the largest waterfalls in Europe. A train took us back to Zurich, where we stayed again in our quaint B&B. This allowed us a day to visit a cave in the Swiss countryside, where people hid to escape persecution during the Reformation. Next we went by train from Zurich to Colmar in the Alsace region of northeast France. Karen had rented a gîte in the small town of Angersheim. Angersheim is off the tourist track, so despite its quaint medieval appearance, it is a town where people actually live and work. We got to our gîte down this narrow, twisty street, through a portal, and into a courtyard. Its central location was perfect for exploring the area. While we often bought food in local stores, we liked to try food from the markets when we could. Alsace was a noted wine-growing region back in Roman times, and the countryside is still covered by vineyards. The vines were just beginning to leaf out, and it occurred to me that grapes, like apples and other fruit with seeds, must flower and be pollinated. But where were the grape flowers? Searching under the new leaves, we found small clusters of buds. A week or two later, we found tiny, unobtrusive blossoms under the grape leaves. Alsace is bordered on the east by the Rhine River, and on the west by the Vosges Mountains. It has been claimed back and forth numerous times by France and Germany. While many of the town and family names are German, French is the official language, although Alsatian is spoken by many. Numerous castles and fortresses give evidence to Alsace's contentious history. When you consider all the strife and turmoil Alsace has been subjected to for centuries, it's amazing to find historical structures that still exist. The Colmar pocket experienced some of the most notorious violence near the end of World War II, and some towns were completely destroyed. Colmar is the regional capital and was relatively undamaged during the war. It is considered to be the best preserved city in Alsace. The old center is a popular tourist spot. Strasbourg experienced more damage, but the large cathedral and much of the surrounding square was spared. After the war, a lot was done to rebuild and restore the city, like much of Europe after the war, and the old center has been designated a World Heritage Site. Strasbourg is the location for the European Parliament, the European Court of Human Rights, and numerous other institutions. While we appreciated Colmar and Strasbourg, we most enjoyed riding the countryside and visiting the half-timbered towns that are just too cute, like a time warp to the Middle Ages, or a medieval movie set. It's hard to describe with words, so I'll just let the pictures go by. We took a train one day to St. Maria Mines. Halfway there, the train transferred us to this bus with a unique bicycle jail for our bikes. There has been silver mining in this area for over 1,000 years. Silver mining became very important here in the 16th century. In the late 17th century, the Amish church was begun at St. Maria Mines when Jacob Ammon and his followers disagreed with their Swiss counterparts and excommunicated them. Our route back from St. Maria Mines started in the town with this narrow back street. However, it broadened out to this beautiful rail trail that went for miles down the valley. We took a side trip in pursuit of foie gras, which promised to be a mere 200 meters away, but turned out to be over 1,000 meters up a very steep road. Shortly after we regained the trail, it just disappeared. One day we rode to the town of Munster, famous for its cheese and noted for its annual jazz festival. The stork population began to decline drastically in Alsace in the 1960s. In addition to loss of habitat and electrocution on power lines, many did not return from their migration to West Africa. Management measures, such as keeping the young from migrating for their first 3 years, have brought a dramatic turnaround. We spotted 7 nests with chicks on just one side of one roof in Munster. We went by train from Alsace to Trier in Germany to ride along the Moselle River. Trier is the oldest city in Germany, preceding Rome by centuries, and has many historical sites through the ages. However, we arrived on Friday at Pentecost weekend, and Trier was so congested with revelers that we left the city directly from the train as quickly as we could, so we didn't get any pictures. Pentecost is nominally a religious holiday in Europe. While church services may be a little busier, like Easter and Christmas here, it is primarily the summer kickoff weekend in Germany, like Memorial Day in the United States. While planning the trip, Karen found most accommodations online already filled up for the weekend, so she made reservations where she could rather than leave it to chance. She specifically looked for bed and bike places that provide secure parking for bicycles. The first night was a pension in Meyring, refreshingly quiet after the hubbub of Trier. Our reservation the next night was at a B&B in Bernkastel Kues. We got there at 4 p.m. No one answered the door when we arrived, so we walked around back and enjoyed a relaxed snack on the patio overlooking the valley. An hour later, when our hosts had still not shown up, we became concerned that we might not have a place to stay for the night. Having seen several Zimmer frei signs riding up through the town, we decided to investigate before they were all filled up. We ended up at another B&B nearby for half the cost and this view over the valley. A few days later, we got an email from the first B&B requesting payment for holding the room. We replied that we had been there at an appropriate time, waited over an hour, and then had to search for other accommodations. Since they had compromised us by not providing the accommodations as expected, we would not be sending payment. We didn't hear anything further. We didn't have reservations for the third night along the Moselle, but had a goal for a pension recommended by Mark Mann, a friend who is working in Germany. As it happened, Frau Schmidt had a room available with a balcony facing the river. We really enjoyed the view and watching the river traffic. Here are some of the sights we saw while riding along the Moselle River in Germany. A helicopter spraying vines on steep hillsides. A replica of a Roman wine boat. Sundials that let medieval vineyard workers know when to break for lunch. Half-timbered villages. Shackles used for medieval punishment. Roman stairs now used for hiking trails. An ancient convent now in ruins. Caravan parks, a popular form of vacationing for many Europeans. Bicycle ferries. Swans and cygnets. Lovers. And numerous ancient castles. We finished our ride along the Moselle in the town of Cochem, with its impressive castle overlooking the river. There we packed our bikes into their suitcases at the train station to go to Mainz. In Mainz, we were able to connect with Mark Mann. He gave us a lot of good information for biking in Germany and enjoyed showing us some of the sights in Mainz. Mainz is close to Frankfurt. There we checked our bike cases into the left luggage at the airport for a week and flew to Bergen, Norway. We arrived in Bergen about 12:30 a.m. It was still twilight, this far north. The inexpensive B&B room we booked for 10 hours was $120, with breakfast in a plastic bag hung on the doorknob in the hallway. Bergen originated as a trading community around 1,000 years ago. 800 years ago, it was an important Hanseatic trading city due to trade in dried cod from northern Norway. Few early structures still exist. The oldest is the 12th century stone Mariakirken with its impressive pulpit. Major fires have repeatedly destroyed large areas of Bergen through the centuries, the most recent in 1955. These 6 warehouses are about 400 years old, but most of the old quayside has been rebuilt, with wood. The new brick hotel behind is not without its controversy. A funicular ride to the top of Mount Floyen provides spectacular views over the city. A ferry system serves the coast of Norway. Our boat, the Midnight Sol, or Midnight Sun, makes a 2-week trip around the top of Norway and back. We booked a cabin for 1 week to the turnaround point at Kirkenes. While it is a true ferry, taking small cars and making regular stops all along the way, it is much like a small cruise ship, though without the casinos, theaters, and activities of big cruise ships. The entertainment is the scenery along the way. However, they try hard to attend to passenger needs. I had my own personal chef due to dietary needs. Because it is a transportation system rather than a leisure cruise, port stops vary a lot. There is opportunity for sightseeing in a few larger towns, but port calls are often in the wee hours when most places are closed. Just a quick stop to load and unload passengers and goods. A different Hurtigruten ferry leaves Bergen every day to make the 2-week trip to Kirkenes and back. We occasionally passed some of them on their return, as well as others serving shorter routes. Fjords are long, narrow inlets with steep sides carved by glaciers during the Ice Age. One of the towns that Hurtigruten serves is Geiranger at the end of the 62-mile-long Geiranger Fjord. There are many waterfalls along the way. Farms above the fjord are accessed by ladders and steep trails. At one time, tax assessors would have to visit the different farms to collect revenue. Unsurprisingly, they would often find that the ladders had been damaged by storms, making the farms inaccessible. Nearer the sea, the numerous ice-scoured channels of the fjords form islands, called skerries. Skerry means a rock in the sea. Some are quite mountainous, while others barely break the surface at low tide. 1,000-year-old Trondheim is Norway's 3rd largest city. Leif Erikson became a Christian here at the urging of the King of Norway, before exploring west of Greenland to become the first European in what is now North America. The Nidaros Cathedral is the oldest medieval building in Norway. It is a national shrine and the 4th most important Roman Catholic pilgrimage site. The high altar was built directly over the tomb of St. Olaf. Stiftsgarden is the official royal residence in Trondheim. The current King of Norway, Harald V, is a direct descendant of St. Olaf. The Scenic Wharf area is a popular tourist spot. Infrastructure encourages bicycling throughout the city. For 15 years, Trondheim has had the world's only bicycle lift. In one town, we found kittiwakes nesting on the sides of buildings. In another town, numerous A-frames were covered with drying cod. As we progressed north, we noticed that the trees became fewer and smaller. We crossed the Arctic Circle as we passed this island. That happened to be the evening for the full moon ride, so I took this photo in the direction where the moon should rise. North of the Arctic Circle in the summer, the moon doesn't rise above the horizon. A small party was held on the top deck as we approached Troll Fjord. Though small, Troll Fjord is exceptionally pretty. After we left the fjord, we got our first glimpse of the midnight sun. The following day, there was an Arctic Circle crossing ceremony with King Neptune. This brought more people out on deck to enjoy the sunshine, although there wasn't much exposed skin away from the two hot tubs. Amazingly, the city of Tromsø was undamaged during World War II, and the center has the most old wood houses in North Norway. Most towns in North Norway were completely destroyed by Hitler's scorched earth policy as the German army retreated from the Soviet advance. The only structure left in Honningsvåg was the church. Simply designed houses became the standard after the war because of the tremendous need for cost-effective and rapidly assembled buildings. Communities seem quite plain at first glance, but there is a certain charm to the many colors of the simple houses. A closer look reveals minor architectural variations in some homes. Most communities are connected by road, though ferries are an integral part of the road system. A few cyclists are intrepid enough to cycle to Norway's northernmost point, then take the ferry back. After rounding the top of Norway, we dropped down to Kirkenes. It was occupied by Germany during World War II, and the German Navy base was a serious concern to the Allies because of its location. It was the second most bombed city by the Allies during the war, then was burned by the Germans as they retreated. Only 13 houses were left when the Soviet liberators arrived at the end of the war. Kirkenes is just 10 miles by road from the Russian border. It was often a tense place during the Cold War. Now, more amiable interaction with Russia is quite evident by the signs on businesses. It was interesting to note that we had sailed as far from Bergen, our starting point, as if we had gone the opposite direction to Rome. As we flew from Kirkenes through Oslo to go back to Frankfurt and get our bikes, we were able to reflect on the sights we had seen while sailing along the coast of Norway. After getting our bikes from left luggage at the Frankfurt airport, we took a train to Rothenburg. Rothenburg was a prominent imperial city in the Middle Ages. It became Protestant during the Reformation. In 1631, during the 30 Years' War, it was occupied through the winter by a Catholic army. They spared the city when the mayor met a challenge to drink a 3-liter tankard of wine in one gulp. However, the city was destitute and empty after the army left in the spring. 3 years later, the Black Death Plague of 1634 decimated Europe. While it prompted Oberammergau's famous Passion Play, it put Rothenburg into a virtual state of suspended animation, preserving its 17th century structure. Rothenburg was rediscovered in the late 19th century and became a favorite tourist destination. It suffered severe damage near the end of World War II. However, it was saved from total destruction by intervention of a U.S. Assistant Secretary of War and the defending German officer who surrendered the town in violation of Hitler's order to fight to the end. Restoration began almost immediately after the war. The city walls were only recently completed. Today, Rothenburg's quaintness and cuteness has made it much like a medieval theme park. A town specialty is making schneeballs, a pretty but particularly nasty pastry with various coatings. From Rothenburg, we rode to Burg Kolmberg, our one night in a real castle. Like many accommodations along popular bicycle routes in Germany, it had a garage for parking our bikes. While it has been remodeled to provide modern amenities, it retains its medieval ambiance and is furnished with antiques. In addition to travelers, it can accommodate large groups for weddings and other occasions. Located prominently on top of a hill, it has marvelous views looking over the surrounding countryside. The grounds around the base of the castle are a private exotic animal reserve. From Kolmberg, we started our ride along the Altmühl River. Mark Mann had loaned us maps of the Altmühl bike route, in German. However, we found the route to be well marked with only a few minor confusions along the way. The route follows a mix of paved paths, country roads, and well-packed dirt-gravel trails. The Altmühl is the slowest moving river in Germany, and is canoeable much of its length. It is quite scenic, as it meanders through farmland and forested hillsides, through medieval towns, and past fortresses, castles, and sandstone cliffs. Our schedule was uncertain this far into the trip, so we decided to wing it rather than make reservations. When it came close to time to stop, we looked for Zimmerfrei signs. One place we stopped at didn't have room, but the lady made a phone call, then got on her bicycle and led us a few blocks away to a friend who didn't put out a sign but took her overflow. They still actively farmed, so we could park our bikes in the barn. As the weather was nice, our breakfast was served on a patio overlooking the valley. Stores were closed on Sundays, which made it awkward to find food for lunch. So when we found an antique vehicle show in this town, we enjoyed the street food as well as the cars, bikes, and a tractor parade. We had been to Regensburg once in off-season and intended to stay there. However, it was very busy and available rooms were quite expensive. So we checked some bed-bike places listed with the maps that Mark had loaned us to find a Zimmer about 10 km beyond Regensburg, which provided this view from the balcony. The Altmühl River eventually turns into the Rhine-Main-Danube Canal, which connects the Main River with the Danube to allow transcontinental water transport. It was first attempted by Charlemagne in 793 A.D. In 1836, Bavarian King Ludwig I ordered a canal built that was used until 1950. Much controversy attended the building of the new canal, completed in 1992, and 1/5 of its cost went to environmental concerns. Many decry the canal for spoiling the Altmühl Valley, though we found it to be quite scenic. We ended our ride at Straubing on the Danube River. There we found a quiet corner by the train station to put our bikes back in the suitcases. Then we took a train to Munich, where we had a day to wander around and repack our luggage for the flight home. In all the places we visited this trip, bicycle travel was encouraged, with dedicated paths, bridges, parking facilities, and commercial accommodations.